Hello and welcome to the football world. You're watching the Football Current, powered by pure football energy. Every once in a while, football produces a moment that feels strangely inevitable. A player arrives at a club, pulls on the shirt for the very first time, and somehow it already feels like he has been there forever. No adjustment period, no visible nerves, no awkward adaptation phase, just instant belonging, as if the club, the system, the expectations were always meant for him. That is exactly what has been happening with Piero Hincapié at Arsenal. Because the way he has stepped into this team, the way he has defended, the way he has imposed himself on some of the best attackers in the Premier League, you would genuinely think he had been wearing the Arsenal badge for the last decade. Whether he lines up at left back or shifts inside to center back, the effect is the same. Composure, authority, control. Watch his recent performances against Brighton and Hove Albion, Chelsea or Tottenham Hotspur, and a clear pattern begins to emerge. From the first whistle to the final minute, he isn't just solid, he's dominant. And strangely enough, the best part of his defending is the part most people barely notice. Because Piero Hincapié doesn't rely on desperate sliding tackles or last-ditch goal-line heroics. Most of the time, those moments never happen. Not because the danger wasn't there, but because he already killed it 10 seconds earlier. That is the difference between a reactive defender and a proactive one. And right now, Arsenal may have found one of the most proactive defenders in Europe. When Mikel Arteta began rebuilding Arsenal, he wasn't just looking for good defenders. He was looking for a very specific type. Players who are brave on the ball. Players who can defend huge spaces behind them. Players who step forward aggressively instead of retreating passively. Players who understand that modern defending begins long before the final tackle. And over the past few seasons, Arsenal's recruitment has followed that blueprint almost perfectly.
Years.
Siempre, como digo, quiero ganar títulos con esta camiseta, quiero dejar mi nombre, dejar una huella y ojalá yo quiera, sea pronto, empezar bien y hacer lo más importante.
It's very much liked amongst the players. You can see that the way they interact and react with him. So I'm very pleased that he's showing that level.
The partnership between William Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes became the foundation of that identity. Power, timing, aggression. But even with that duo firmly established, Arteta still wanted more depth, more versatility, more tactical flexibility. So when Arsenal suddenly announced the arrival of Piero Hincapié from Bayer Leverkusen, many people were confused. Another left-footed center-back? Another defender? In a squad already full of them? At first glance, it looked unnecessary. But Arteta wasn't thinking about numbers. He was thinking about profiles. Because defenders like Hincapié are rare. Players who combine the physical intensity of a center-back with the mobility and speed of a fullback. Players who can comfortably play 3 or 4 different defensive roles without breaking the structure of the team. And as soon as he stepped onto the pitch, the logic behind the signing became obvious. From day one, Hincapié looked calm, composed, almost eerily comfortable. You would never guess he was only 23. There was no hesitation in his decisions, no uncertainty in his positioning, just the quiet authority of someone who completely understands what is happening around him. And that level of maturity isn't something that appears overnight. It's something that started many years earlier, thousands of miles away from North London. Before European scouts ever noticed him, Piero Hincapié was just a teenager training at Independiente del Valle. At 17, he wasn't expected to be a starter. He wasn't even expected to stand out. He was simply there to learn. But something unusual started happening during preseason training. Every session at the club was monitored by GPS tracking systems that measured speed, acceleration, sprint numbers, and physical output. And when the data came back each day, the coaching staff thought the system was broken. Because the numbers attached to Hincapié's name were ridiculous. Top speed, most sprints, highest acceleration, most high-intensity actions. And he wasn't competing against other teenagers. He was outperforming fully developed first-team professionals. The head coach at the time, Miguel Ángel Ramírez, later admitted the staff genuinely believed there was a technical error. But there wasn't. The skinny 17-year-old simply had physical tools that were already elite. Ramírez eventually described him in simple terms. A beast, not just promising, not just talented, better than many professionals already playing for the first team. And this was at a club famous for producing world-class players. It was the same academy that later produced Moises Caicedo and William Pacho. Yet somehow, Hincapié forced his way ahead of them in the development queue. Not because he was older, not because he was physically bigger, but because he was ready, mentally, technically, and tactically. Most defenders develop slowly. The position demands experience, timing, game intelligence. But even as a teenager, Hincapié already understood defensive spacing, body positioning, and pressing triggers at a surprisingly advanced level. That preseason changed everything. It was the moment everyone inside the club realized they weren't developing a normal prospect. They were watching the early stages of something much bigger. After moving through South America and eventually reaching Europe, Hincapié joined Bayer Leverkusen, where his development accelerated under one of the most intelligent coaches in modern football, Xabi Alonso. At Leverkusen, he was rarely confined to a single role. Sometimes he played as the left center-back in a back four. Other times he shifted wider in a back three. Occasionally he even operated as a wing-back or an inverted fullback. And instead of struggling with that tactical complexity, he thrived. When Alejandro Grimaldo arrived at Leverkusen, Hincapié often dropped deeper into the build-up phase. From there, he became a surprisingly progressive passer. In multiple Bundesliga matches, he completed over 100 passes in a single game. His line-breaking distribution ranked among the best defenders in the league. And he wasn't just passing safely across the back line. He was carrying the ball forward, driving into midfield, breaking pressure through dribbles. In one match against VfL Bochum, he surged through the midfield line before threading a perfect through ball to Patrick Schick. Against Bayern Munich, he sprinted past Leroy Sane down the flank. And against Borussia Dortmund, he outran defenders before delivering another assist for Schick. Those moments revealed something important. He wasn't just a destroyer. He was a complete defender. Physical, technical, intelligent. Exactly the type of player Arteta loves. But perhaps the most fascinating part of Hincapié's evolution is how his aggression matured. During his first Bundesliga season, his intensity sometimes crossed the line. 13 yellow cards, 3 red cards. It was chaotic. He was fearless, but reckless. Yet over time, that raw aggression became controlled. His tackling success rate climbed. His decision-making improved. And the red cards disappeared entirely over the following seasons. Instead of diving into tackles, he began choosing the exact moment to strike. And that discipline is now visible every time he steps onto the pitch for Arsenal. Watch how he defends. He doesn't chase blindly. He studies. He anticipates. And then, he attacks the duel with complete conviction. Sometimes that conviction borders on confrontation. In a Champions League match against Slavia Prague, he won every single duel he contested. At one point, a towering striker tried to intimidate him physically. The response was immediate. Hincapié squared up without hesitation. Zero fear. In fact, Gabriel Magalhaes had to step in and pull him away before things escalated further. That moment captured the essence of his mentality. He doesn't just accept duels. He enjoys them. He welcomes contact. He thrives on the physical battle. It's the kind of mentality you often see in legendary defenders like Sergio Ramos. And interestingly, former coaches say Hincapié carried himself with that same confidence even as a teenager. He genuinely believed he belonged at the highest level long before he actually arrived there. Now fast forward to the present. The Premier League, the pressure of Arsenal's title ambitions, the expectations of one of England's biggest clubs. And somehow, Piero Hincapié looks completely unfazed. When Arsenal lost the ball against Brighton, he instantly chased the recovery. When Tottenham tried attacking the left flank, he shut it down repeatedly. In one match, he finished with 11 clearances and several tackles and interceptions combined. But statistics alone don't capture his impact, because what he truly brings is structural stability. When Arsenal defend high, he covers massive spaces behind the line. When the team presses aggressively, he steps forward to kill attacks early. When possession builds from the back, he provides calm circulation under pressure. And that versatility might be his most valuable trait. Left back, center back, wide center back in a back three. He can perform all of them at a high level, which means Arteta can reshape his defensive structure mid-game without losing balance. That kind of tactical flexibility is incredibly valuable in modern football, and it explains why Arsenal fans have already fallen in love with him. because defenders like Hincapié bring something supporters deeply respect: commitment, relentless effort, the visible pride of someone who treats defending as an art form. And yet, there is also a fascinating human story behind his rise. This wasn't a perfectly smooth journey. At one stage in his career, when he moved to Talleres, things became difficult. Minutes were limited. Frustration grew. His coach later admitted he feared the young defender wasn't emotionally ready for such a rapid leap abroad. But that struggle forced him to mature. It sharpened his mentality. It strengthened his resilience. And eventually, it prepared him for the moment when Europe came calling. From Ecuador to Argentina, from Argentina to Germany, from Germany to the Premier League, each step demanded adaptation. Each step demanded growth. And now, at only 23 years old, Piero Hincapié finds himself at the heart of one of the most exciting projects in European football. Because when you step back and examine the bigger picture, he almost feels like the perfect Mikel Arteta defender. Brave enough to demand the ball under pressure, fast enough to recover in open space, aggressive enough to confront attackers early, technical enough to build play from the back, and intelligent enough to understand when each of those qualities is required. Very few defenders combine all of those traits, but Hincapié does, which is why his arrival might turn out to be one of Arsenal's most important signings, even if it initially surprised people. Right now, he may be competing with players like Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba for minutes, but over the course of a long season, injuries happen. Rotation becomes necessary, and elite squads require depth that doesn't weaken the starting level. That is exactly what Arsenal have found. A defender who can step into multiple roles without the team losing stability. A player who looks just as comfortable starting a Champions League match as he does closing out a difficult Premier League victory. And perhaps most importantly, a player whose mentality perfectly reflects the identity Arsenal are trying to build. Because great teams are not only defined by attackers, they are defined by defenders who take pride in stopping goals. Defenders who celebrate clearances the same way others celebrate goals. Defenders who treat every duel like a personal challenge. That is what Piero Hincapié brings to this Arsenal team. Intensity, belief, and the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly who he is on the football pitch, which raises a fascinating question for the future. If this is what Piero Hincapié looks like at 23, what will he become in 5 years? Because if his development continues on this trajectory, Arsenal may not have simply signed another defender. They may have secured the foundation of their defense for the next decade. And that leads to one final question. Could Piero Hincapié eventually become the next great defensive leader at Arsenal? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of football's most exciting defenders, make sure to subscribe for more cinematic football stories. Because the game is always evolving, and sometimes the future arrives sooner than anyone expects.